You're listening to episode 73 of the Confident Writer podcast with Jane Pike. Okay, so truth be known, I'm here with two of my favourite people and we've already been chatting for a significant period of time. It's the Queen of England and best-selling author, Tania Kindersley.
Yay!
And soon to be best-selling author and similar member of the royal family, Kathy Price. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
It didn't seem right to end the year without wrapping up as a trio. We kind of needed to get one out. And we have no theme. I was just saying before, we have no theme. So what do we want to talk about? Do we want to be reflective? Do we want to be futuristic? What should we bring to the party?
Let's be futuristic. I can't even say the word. Futuristic in this. There's been so much shit. Oh, I've just sworn. From the previous year that we all know about that. I think reflection on that's fair enough. But let's go forward. Let's go. Okay, what do we want to do? What's good? What can we use that we've learned and bring forward? Something like that. Let's look forward to good things.
I love that. And Tania, what do you think? What's your assessment on today's topic?
I love that we have no theme. I love that we're going to look forward and look for the good. One of the things that's been floating around in my mind, and I can't work out whether this is just insane optimism or something really useful and hopeful, but the world seems so mad at the moment. And aside from the pandemic and all that, over here we've got Brexit, which means that people's lives are going to be affected, and also everyone's very cross and shouty, especially on the social media. And there's that awful tribal thing, and everyone's retreating into their corners and everyone's finding their ditch to die in. And there are days when I find this really upsetting, because I like to think that we're all a lovely team Blighty all together. And then I thought, well, I can sit in that negativity and sadness and frustration and sometimes even fury, or I can think, well, I think there may be good things to come out of this. I think the whole pandemic, the whole slightly turbulent state of the world could lead people to start thinking about what really matters, what's really important to them. They could re-root themselves, like you repot a plant into better soil, into the things which are truly meaningful, which for me are, I get very soppy about this. It's the human heart and the human spirit and connection and supporting other people and just thinking that we are all in this together. And I don't just mean in countries. I don't just mean in Britain now, where things are a bit tricky. But honestly, I do believe in the human family. And I think there's more that connects us than divides us. So I say, yes, let's go into that future and hope that we'll see some of that.
I love that. I love that so much.
That's lovely. And in fact, there's actually research that's shown that is already happening, in that the questionnaire went out about people's values are sort of at this point, having been through the pandemic. And so much of it was that they really valued the family connection more, probably because they couldn't have a lot of it. So that became a much more important thing, was the family. So many more people have learnt skills, be it baking or drawing or music or learning a language. So all of these things are real positives that they're carrying forward. And it seems that it's not just during the pandemic, when they've been shut down. People have learnt they enjoy learning or enjoy doing something different. So what you're saying, Tania, about the connection part and the expression, I think is actually happening.
That's so beautiful. I'm just going to sit here and listen to both of you talk. I'm sick of my own voice.
We want you to along.
do you have looking forward thoughts or future hopes? Or
I do. I feel like, so when I was driving out to town last night, a very unusual happening for me, I was reflecting on the last year, and it was one of those situations where you don't realize how dense the last 12 months have been, in terms of like, wow, that only happened 6 months ago, or that only happened in March, or like there's actually been an incredible juxtaposition of beauty and difficulty this year, you know. And I think that one of the things that I really carry with me through everything now is that life is actually a constant balance of that dichotomy of coexistence of different forces that appear to be disparate or separate, but actually you can hold the tensions of both at the same time. And so it's like, if you have to take the difficult elements of it, if they're necessary for the beautiful ones, then I will take it. And I think that's what this year's been. It's like been very challenging on lots of different levels, and I know that I'm not alone in that. And then also incredibly formative, but formative in a way of like, you know, when I say formative, it's like you think of building, you know, adding on. I think that for me personally, I feel like I'm going full circle to it's like a homecoming, like a stripping away of conditioned thoughts and
you're getting
ways,
the real you.
Yeah, ways of expressing where I've perhaps muted or skived around the heart of the matter, you know, like things that expressing things in a way that I would perhaps choose to express them if I was left alone, you know, just really getting to the heart of things. We were talking about this before. And I think that it takes a certain bravery to be really in line with that, you know. Does that make sense? Like to sort of like say what's true for you. And so coming into the new year, I was saying this before, it's like I really want to just dive into full fat living, like I'm the full ass yes, the showing up. And when I say showing up, I don't mean for the things that necessarily are about outward commitments. I mean sort of showing up for myself, like, you know, artistically, creatively, horsewise, like really just letting the heart lead the way, taking risks on that front, taking more risks, like continuing to grow that kind of sense of yourself. For me, that's really the aim, I think, of where things are going. I'm not sure if that's a little bit too convoluted. I don't know if that came out with clarity at all, but I know what I think
it came out beautifully, because it's something I've thought about a lot. For me, the two words are integrity and authenticity. And that when you step into that for yourself, in essence, you can do no wrong. Because if you can accept that you're using everything you know and everything you want to do in the best way possible at that moment, with the knowledge you have at that moment, what more can you ask? Nothing. So for me, what you've just said about being yourself, stripping away, following your heart's path almost, you know, you're not looking at it in I'm going to say a business sense that, oh, you know, that makes sense to do that and that makes sense. You're just saying, okay, what feels right for me at this precise moment? And I so understand, because I think, as we were talking before, I think a lot of people around the world are at that moment of, what do I want to do with my life? Where do I want to step? I can, you know, definitely within me, that's the next step forward, is that just let it go and just be yourself. Put it out there. However people react is however people react. It's totally their choice. But if you know that you've done what is absolutely right for you with the best possible intention, you can do no harm, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so beautiful. This year's been interesting. Sorry, go Tanya. Sorry. No, go for it.
Well, I just wanted to say what you said about beauty and difficulty. And then, Kathy, what you're saying is step into your absolute authenticity. And I've been thinking about all those things very much this year. I think I was on the path to thinking about them generally, but with the pandemic made it even more acute. And I've been coming to a slight awareness that I think I was in danger of tumbling into a category error. I'm slightly obsessed with category errors. Think about the way that we've been talking in the last 10 minutes. It is actually very beautiful. Even the words are beautiful. Integrity, authenticity, balance. You were saying like a homecoming, the heart of things. These are all beautiful words. I think where I was getting in a muddle is I then thought that the kind of, not so much the really ugly stuff, but the kind of messy, muddly, everyday, when you want to just stomp around and say, sod, damn, bugger, and you feel you're not your most shining, authentic self, and everything's just a bit of a mess. It's like when the weather, it's not a grand storm or a wonderful big snow like we sometimes get here. It's just dirt. And so I would say the sky turns the colour of heartbroken pigeons, and even Scotland looks like somebody's just poured washing up water all over it. And I think, no, but I've got to find the beauty. And actually, that's where you get unbalanced. So one of my things now is, and this is very much, excuse me, so it's rather appropriate, isn't it? My voice has gone, not in an elegant Lauren Bacall way, but in a kind of Fag Ash Lil kind of way. But actually, that's what I'm talking about. When the beauty fails and you can't step in for whatever reason to that glorious higher space, and you feel like you've lost the balance and everything's just a bit ugh. And I'm trying to teach myself that doesn't mean a failure of, I don't know, creativity, imagination, effort, mental equilibrium. It's sometimes you're going to have a crappy day. It's not a grief day, it's not a heartbreak day, it's just a crappy day, and the dogs have eaten the sofa, so you got little bits of feather all over the floor, like you've been doing some kind of terrible avicide, and you can't be bothered to hoover it up because you're so grumpy about it. and there's nothing romantic about that. That's not a poet in a garret. It's just all a bit blah. And those are the next bits that I think I'm going to try and really, how shall I say? I wanted to say tackle, but that sounds too aggressive. But just incorporate.
Yeah,
allow.
Yeah.
And I, sometimes we will reach that incredible singing beauty, even if it's the beauty of really allowing yourself to step into difficulty, to step into disaster, to step into vulnerability. There's a kind of beauty in that, but it's those spaces in the middle where everything's just a bit
grey.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are having that in the pandemic, actually. And it's when your horses are all covered in mud and the field looks hideous, and your grazing plan has gone to hell, and you can't write an epic novel about that. You've just got to stomp your way through it. So that's my next mission. Yes.
But I think what you said there, Tania, is so true, in that if we didn't have those days, we haven't got the comparison to have the good days. If everything was shining light, how would we know it was shining light? We'd always be, it's like, can you have one too many sunny days, that the weather is always that, especially us living in the UK, we so appreciate when it gets warm and the sun shines. But there is the beauty in the rain and everything else. And so I think what you're saying is so true, that when you can look at the dour day and the grey mizzle and accept it for what it is, and as you said, almost rejoice in that, but know it's not going to last, and that the opposite is going to happen as well. So you have the balance again of the less good, the bad, it's your perception of how do you want to think about it. as well, from what you're saying there, is that you could go into a hole and go, well, everything's shite. You know, the horses have got out, the field is ploughed up, the dog's just eaten their dinner, everything is crap, you know. And in essence, you could say it is, but it's again your perception of how you look at it.
And let's not deny the fact it is crap, but as we keep going.
Exactly. But you've got to keep going, and you've got to, you know, you can, I'm not explaining this well, but it's the case of you've always got the opposite there, and it makes you appreciate the good even more, I think is what I'm trying to say in a very convoluted, roundabout, crappy way. But there we go.
Yeah, it's so, I feel like, and this is very self-indulgent, this particular part of the conversation that's about to come up, but it's, I think when I was 20, I'll frame it this way, it's like two different parts of me kind of coalescing or merging together at the moment. The previous version of me that was trying for something but going about it in the wrong way. And then the current version of me, which is becoming sort of more fluent in how to take the energy of what it was I was so driven towards at that time, but actually bring it into the real world. Meaning that, like, when I was 20, and it's going to sound a little bit ridiculous to say out loud, I was 100% convinced that I needed to go and like live in a cave and meditate to become enlightened. Like I was hard on that, like, I'm fascinated by philosophy, by the spiritual texts. I read everything. I did the travel. I like took myself away. I was a student of that world, you know, of those philosophies. And that was driven by this knowing, this kind of like very tangible feeling of the vastness of what we were part of, you know, like this kind of universal knowing, I guess, which is all going into the woo right now. But it's like that tension was very palpable in my body, and I wasn't sure how to hold that and be in life, you know, like how do I hold this knowing? How do I hold this beauty of like everything that life is and still be a functional, banal human? I don't know how to do that. And so I was always fascinated. I remember people being frightened. We were in a class and we were learning, it was a yoga therapy course at this point. This is when I was in India, and they were talking about the various stages of enlightenment within these spiritual texts, and people were afraid of that. And I remember thinking to myself, but how could you be afraid? Because when you're there, it will be perfect and you won't know to be afraid. You don't need to be afraid because afraid doesn't exist within that sphere. So let that go, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, it's I can reflect back on that and sort of have humor and have compassion for myself, but also have reverence that I was like, there was a tenacity within me that wanted to follow that, in spite of that not being part of my background at all. You know, like that was not my family. We're like, well, there goes Jane again. Like, and it was becoming a bit of a joke. And so I think I gradually let that go to be in life in its full intensity and full messiness, and perhaps kind of like veered away from that unconsciously, you know, in terms of like just having to, you know, have a family and start your own, be in the world in a way that makes you a functional human in that respect. But everything's learned in relationship. Like actually, I was never really going to know the full extent of that in solitude. You know, the learnings, right, are in relationship. And I think that's where with our horses, we get to know ourselves and we get to like strip away some of the conditioning, because that relationship, they don't hold that. And so they mirror that experience back to us. And if we're able to see that, then that's part of this kind of connectivity. And I have this belief that, you know, so many people that I work with are really struggling, and horses are their absolute passion. But at the same time, there's a huge amount of pain and hardship around that relationship, you know, that's causing a huge amount of tumultuous feelings and experiences. And it's always interesting to me that despite that, the desire to be with them is still there, right?
It overrides it, yeah.
And I really believe it's like, if we strip away the top layer of that, they are this reminder of our ancientness and our divinity and our bigger picture living that a part of us so yearns for and so is so desirous of, that when it finds an outlet for that, it won't let us surrender
let it go. Yeah.
And so we put up with this surface level discord because on a soul level there's something happening that's like a stronger twine. And so for me, I think coming into this year, it's like how now I've sort of had the gifts of working again with my horses and like really seeing my stuff come up when people are challenging me, or you know, when you've got your children, you've got your significant others, you've got your families, and this is where the learning is, right? Not in the cave. Like this is where you access that. And I guess it's like the permission slip has come. Then I can see the connection between that part of myself and this part of myself now to be like, okay, how do we bring that now into what's happening currently? Like, how do you hold that? How do you hold that awareness and bring that into in alignment with a way that is like sort of functional in the world, I think. And so that's part of my exploration now. That is also juxtaposed with an appropriate level of outrage that I've experienced this year, which is like, and I think that relates to this like really deep feeling that life is so beautiful. Life is so beautiful. And that when we treat each other badly, this is so, you know, going very meta, but like politically, racially, really coming face to face with my own privilege this year, really understanding some very deep discord in our society to do with the climate change stuff, to do with the environment, and just feeling grief-stricken about it and not understanding why everybody isn't mobilizing. You know, it's like what is this? And so that appropriate outrage, I think I used to see that as a weakness or a failing of like emotional integrity or control, and now it's like that is a necessary energy to say these things matter, I matter, and it's worth defending. I need more coffee.
I need gin, I think.
As a monologue.
I know, but
to actually possibly, you've been talking about the very, very big, which always fascinates me. But I want to pick up on something you said in the middle, which sounds like the very, very small, but I think maybe emblematic of the very, very big. And you talked about the pain that people feel in their relationship with their horses. And would you just expand on that a little bit? Give us an example of the kind of thing. Is it the not good enough feeling, or that I'm always going to get it wrong feeling, or what is it?
Yeah, it's so I'm in a very privileged position, I believe, where there's a few different reasons why people might come to me to do the sort of things that we would do together. One of them could just be curiosity, that they're really interested in the same kind of conversations that we're having, or, you know, there's a fascination around trauma work and how we can integrate stress and that sort of thing. So it's sort of in that situation, there's nothing really wrong. It's just they're seekers. People are seekers, and for whatever reason, the program fits in with, you know, the work fits in with that, following that curiosity, which I love. And there's also a large number of people where I'm, in their mind, the end of the road. I'm the last hope. And I get not an insignificant number of emails or messages where people say, if this doesn't work, I will be giving up horses, or I will quit. And alongside of that is a huge amount of shame, usually, and also a internalization of what I've come to recognize as a combination of social and cultural pressures. So the not good enough theme is very much part of a bigger fabric conversation. That's not just a individual conversation. As soon as more than one person is experiencing something, as soon as it's so pervasive that for the most part, all of us feel a seed of not good enough, we can start to understand that maybe there's something bigger going on that we're all being fed. So there's that, definitely. The way that our lives have come to be organized is that we are now anywhere from 1 to 2 to several steps removed from nature. And so there's a disconnection that exists on a continuum, I guess, depending on where you live, how you sit, and what your background has been, that creates a lot of stress to our natural psyche, to our way of being, because we are intrinsically part of nature. So the further you get removed from that, the more disconnected you get, and the more isolated you feel, and the more individualized you start to identify, the sort of more individualistic you start to identify yourself as, meaning that rather than understanding this pervasive sense of anxiety, fear, hopelessness, fill in the blank with whatever you want, as a symptomology of my situation, I will internalize that as something that is inherently wrong with me, or a flaw, or a weakness. And as a consequence of that, I take this load as mine. And I think that on one level, the horse connection is that nature connection, is that reminder of like, this, you are not that, you are not that, you are not that. And then the war inside of us is, but I feel this and I can't get to that. I hear you, but I can't bridge that gap alone. And so I think this is where, we were talking about finding an entry point before, where, this is our fundamental belief, right? We have these bigger beliefs, we have these understandings about our connection to a bigger organism, a bigger sense of self, a bigger sense of life in the universe, if you like. But the entry point is, we are in this body, we are experiencing these things. And while we might have an understanding of that, the reconciliation has to happen here. The reconciliation has to happen where we're feeling it. We can't reconcile it with a spiritual understanding or with just with a heart-based understanding, because how we feel it is in our muscles and in our breath and in our body. And we need tools to be able to deal with it on that level, to be able to sort of access these bigger understandings and have that kind of come into alignment. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it's fantastic. I love it so much. I'm actually taking notes because it's so good. But the thing that really resonated with me in all of that, and it fascinates me because it's something that I know all three of us feel really deeply about. And I don't think in all our incredible conversations we've ever discussed it. And it's exactly what you just said, Jane, about connection to nature. And I think the reason it resonated with me so much, as I've gone further into what I call, with less and less irony, the place of peace, which is where I do the standing and the breathing and the connecting with my thoroughbred. I'm always doing it in a muddy Scottish field, and unless we're at the height of summer, it's always pretty muddy. And one of the things, as I refine it, one of the things I've been very conscious of is planting my feet on this good Scottish earth. And that's partly to do, Jane, with your work about the body. I've become so much more conscious of my body. My poor old body, I don't think I've been listening to it for a single second for the last 50 years. So I'm really feeling those feet on that springy turf, and it's really wonderful springy turf. You can almost feel it moving under your feet. And the other thing I've been working on is trying to open up and trust my intuition, my instincts more. And I think what you were talking about with us and the horses, with humans and horses, I think connecting on the intuitive level is a huge part of it, and I can't really explain why. I just believe it. I suppose that's my intuition. Anyway, I did a lovely podcast with a lady called Heather Drummond, she's called, isn't she? Kathy, you've with her as well.
And Jane,
and she's Jane, you have too. Yes. So okay, we all know Heather, and she's very big on the intuition. And she asked me straight out, which I wasn't expecting, where does your intuition come from? So I had to intuit where my intuition came from, and I just went with it. And I said, it comes from the earth. It comes up through that Scottish earth. And if I open myself to it, then I can hear those instinctive voices, those intuitive voices, you know, whatever they are. Jungians would say they're from the collective unconscious. I don't know, you know, Buddhists would say they're from another go round, another life. But for me, actually, there's some fairly good neurobiology about this, about where intuition lives. And I did read about it the other day, and I've now forgotten every single word. But there is a science. But for me, instinctively, it comes from that earth. And that's what you're talking about. That's that connection with nature. So not only am I out under a big sky, not only am I breathing in that glorious muddy horse smell, because she's always covered in mud too, because she lives very naturally, which is a polite way of putting it. But I can feel the literal earth under my feet, and I'm starting to think, oh my goodness, I am going into the woo. I'm starting to think that's where my wisdom, such as it is, comes from.
I love it. I love it.
Sorry, didn't expect that to come out, but anyway, there it was.
No,
you know, the cyclic nature of things as well is that what I realized talking about like the previous version of Jane and the current version is the previous version was seeking transcendence. You know, like I was seeking some kind of like movement away as the holy place, if you like, for wanting to, you know, not in a religious sense, but kind of like as this like, and now it's like
it wasn't
actually,
here.
It's here.
Yeah.
It's like the thing that you are trying to move away from is the answer.
Yeah. And that's the paradox. Bruce Lipton always says that. He says that when you get to that point, you realize that heaven is on earth.
Yeah.
And you're living it now.
As a felt experience, though, as not as an intellectual understanding.
No, absolutely. Your everyday existence is that thing. And I mean, the intuition part, I so get that. And I'm so lucky because, you know, like with Tania, well, we all live in beautiful areas, but because I'd sort of been livestock farming for 30 years, you're so reliant on nature. You can't beat the weather. You have to, I'm going to use the word succumb in the sense that you can't control. So you have to move along. And that's where we were talking before. You can fight it or you can go with it. And so that's been a real part of me, that the every day to stand there and notice the shades of grey and notice what the clouds are doing. I'm so blessed that I can look up and down the valley and see the weather coming. So you become part of it. You sort of react to it. I mean, I could go really, really super woo. I don't know whether it might be a step too far.
Oh,
at what point did you think that was inappropriate?
Well, yeah, exactly. This is about integrity and authenticity, isn't it? So right, we'll go super woo. So I started this journey in 2002, thanks to my previous horse, and since then it's been exploration. But for the first, I think, 12 years, it was reading books, reading and experiencing. And one day I found a book called The Journey by Brandon Bays. And I don't know if either of you have come across it, but basically it was a story. Brandon Bays knew all about spirituality and healing, and she had a huge growth in her womb. And the doctor said, right, we need to remove it. And she said, no, give me a month. I want to try and cure it myself. That's the gist of the story. And the story is her going to various places, meeting various people, doing all these different ceremonies. And then this one ceremony she did, which I'm sure there are many versions on. And I read this book in about, 2007, something like that. So it's a bit vague. But it was about sitting around a fire, thinking of all the times when you might still have an argument left in you with somebody you haven't resolved, whether it's your parents or anyone. You sit around a fire, you have the discussion, you resolve it, and then you drop down to the next fire, and it's the next one, and you go through these series of fires. And she described how after she'd done this to a certain extent, she came to a black hole, and she was frightened because she knew she had to go into this black hole, and she didn't know what was the other side. Now, I can't actually remember what happened to her. I do know she healed herself. And so this was about halfway through the book. And me being me go, oh, I'm going to have a go at that. Never mind instructions. That sounds like a good idea. So I did it. And I sat round the fire, and there was, various little things that I remembered. And I came up, there was the black hole. And I thought, she did it and she survived. So I'm going, boys. So dive through the black hole. And this was the woo-woo bit. I ended up immediately, I literally was, and I'm sitting in the room right outside the window. I was literally floating outside the window. This was the experience, but I was part of everything. So it felt like if I extended my right hand, which would be to the west, I'd be in America. My left hand, I'd be in China. And I was part of the trees. It was just that understanding that there was no barrier. You're connected to everything. And that, I don't know how long that is. It might have been 5 seconds. It might have been 5 minutes. I have no idea. Was it a dream? I don't think so, because it was a really conscious process that I had to go through. I was wide awake doing it. So I did it. And then I realized the next half of the book was instructions on how to do it. So I thought, oh dear, jump the gun a bit there, dears. But so that for me, what you're talking about, the connection with everything, we are energy. There is no barrier. And that's where I'm at the moment, that factor of we are energy and there is no stuff. It just makes perfect sense. And I know we have the human, condition and the why are we here? Jane, you were talking about the transcendence and the human side of us trying to find the answer and why have we come here and things like that. I just go simplistic now. We're energy. So yeah, that was my super book. But that for me now, when I'm with Teasel, you were talking about intuition. It's all there. She gives me information, or being with her allows me to find information. I don't know, but yeah, totally agree on all counts.
What interests me is that all of us have used the word connection in slightly different ways with slightly different emphases, but that's what we're all talking about, isn't it? And Jane, when I asked you about the pain that these the people you work with feel with their horses, I think you used the word dislocation. So there's that dislocation, that disconnection. I picked up on the disconnection from nature, but actually, Kathy, you're right. It's everything. And one of the things that I think happens with human beings is that we become unconnected, uncoupled from ourselves. And this takes us back to that, the ideas of authenticity and integrity. We that lovely link between our true self, that self you're born with, when you have everything, when you first come in the world. That little baby, that has everything. There's no self-consciousness, there's no scarcity, there's no lack, there's no not good enough. That little baby is an empress. She has everything she needs, he has everything he wants. And then bit by bit, the world comes along and says a variety of no. And we move further and further and further away from that original self, from that true self. And maybe there's something, I'm really making things up on the spot here, and I love to do that, and I love that you both let me. I've never thought this thought before, but I'm going to go with it. Is if part of life, and modern life in particular, is a stretch, a straining away from that true self, maybe there's something in the horse which we recognize that that was us, because they're 50 million years old and we've only been here for 5 minutes. Maybe they've got that everythingness in them, that abundance in them, that we humans, through societal and cultural pressures, lose. And maybe that's what we're trying to reconnect with. Does that make any sense at all? Sorry, no idea why I went there.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree. That's what I think is like it's a remembrance. It's on some level.
That's the best word. Yeah.
Yeah, a remembrance on some level. I got an email recently. This sort of all ties in a kind of slightly odd way. And again, it just fascinates me that people feel the need to express this, because often when people are emailing me, they also say that while they're typing, they're crying. That's like a very common thing, that like the expression of it, it's either they have been moved to shift something in some way, and even the process of going through talking about what it is that they're feeling is kind of a big deal. And so at the end of this one particular email, which I only got a couple of days ago, was please be kind, like in the response, like this was a big thing from, and please be kind, and which is the kind of inference that there's the possibility that I won't be. Do you know what I mean? Like because if you have to express please be kind, the expectation might be that maybe that's not going to be met in the same way. And one of the really big things that I think I've always held, but this year especially has put a spotlight on, I guess, is, and it's going to sound a little bit corny and then hopefully I'll qualify it, just how magnificent we are as in terms of like our bodies and the processes that they take us through to keep us safe and to protect us and to do the best job of seeing us through a particular challenge. And sometimes we get stuck on that, like our bodies get stuck in that place, and that's where we find it hard to kind of stretch our wings back out because we've locked down as a protective mechanism. And even on a very functional level, to think that when you're under stress, the lungs actually wrap around the midline of the body, and the diaphragm does the same to kind of protect the organs and protect the heart, and there's this actual physiological shift that occurs when we go into a mode that we might understand as fight or flight or sympathetic activation, like whatever you want it to call. And I just think like how incredible that is that happens, like what a beautiful thing that is, that our bodies have this capacity to do that, and we can be so disdainful of them. And I certainly have been in the past, like haven't treated my body with reverence. And so it's one of those felt experiences where this year I've really felt that, like I'm not looking at myself now as this, like not enough of this or too much of that, or like I still have my moments, but it's like, wow, what an incredible job it's done getting me through to this place. And now when I see or hear people, it's an incredibly honoured position to hear people's stories when they're in that place. I have nothing but not only compassion, but what's the word that I'm searching for? Admiration. Like at people's stories, and you're still here telling me this, and that's hard, that you've been like, that's really hard, and wow, and you've still got the flame to like keep doing this thing in spite of this, in spite of this, in spite of this. And I guess I wish that we all had that for ourselves, but also that the knowing that that's on the other side for people, like, and I don't mean just for me, but like if you find the right people to kind of create the container for whatever it is you need to explore, that is what you will be met with in the right situations. And if you're not met with that, because this is another whole conversation that we're having all the time in Joyride that you guys know about as well, there are coaching situations or life situations where that is not the case, and that you don't have to stay with that. if that is the case for you. If you're not being met with something which is it's just an inability to know how to deal with what's presenting in the moment, and you need to keep moving until you can find something that can.
I love that. Can I ask you both a question? I know that we were starting off looking forward, and I love that. But all of us have talked about this year, and it has been extraordinary, incredibly challenging. As Jane used it, outraging. I've had a lot of outrage. Kathy knows this because I rang her up and yelled at the telephone. It's when I need to process emotion, and quite often it is just undifferentiated rage, and so I shout at her for about 5 minutes, and then she says very calmly, "Is it useful?" And I decided it actually isn't. And then sometimes we locate it in my body, and that's tremendous. And it was a metal bar across my shoulders, this outrage. And I was out with the dogs. And so in order to get the metal band off my back, I sort of leant over and stuck my bottom in the air. And I did suddenly realize there were people passing by. I wasn't unobserved, shall we say. But the thing is, it felt so good that I thought, I'm not going to stop now. They can just deal with the bottom of the air. And
is that a bottom?
I think it's a bottom. Darling, don't say anything. Just keep walking.
Poor people. We're so lucky, aren't we? We're so lucky that we're not like that.
Yeah. Is that the Tania that lives in that funny house over there? I've heard
I'm
about
not going to
her.
find her book.
Poor thing.
Yeah. So that that was another thing that people had to deal with, as if 2020 wasn't throwing enough at them.
She got a rod in her back.
Yeah. She's got a rod back and her bottom in the air. The dogs were.
She must be suffering from rage at the moment. We know.
Yeah.
Give her your number, Reg. Give her your number.
We should pass this on to the crew, that if you feel really angry and you don't have a good friend in Wales that you can ring up and just stick your bottom in the air, and it really
didn't
works.
Actually say that. But...
No.
Said move. I said move.
You said move, and I went with stick your bottom in the air, but
which is perfect.
Wiggle it just a little.
So my point is that. And there's this all crappy stuff and the little stuff, like we can't do this and we can't do that, and then there's the world is about to end, and that our amygdalas are just in constant hijack. And I mean, 2020 has thrown everything at us, and I mean all of us human beings all around the world. So what I wanted to ask you two was, is there anything you would say that you've learned? Because I always love finding a positive in a negative. I'm very careful not to deny the negative, because we mustn't do that. We mustn't just go to unicorns and bluebirds and butterflies, which is my tendency, and put the negative in the cupboard of doom and pretend it doesn't exist. But what I love to do is take the negative, take a weakness, take a pain, take something which looks awful, and say, can I find something useful in that? And I wonder whether you two had any things that immediately sprung to mind, something that you've really learnt this year, that this awful year has taught you.
Yeah.
I'll go first, if you like, because I have two.
Oh, yes, you answer and I'll think.
Well, first of all, my big one is that it has taught me that I have to process emotions the moment I have them, which is brilliant for me and not so great for Kathy, because she is my chief emotion processor. And Jane, it's really lucky you're in a different time zone, is all I can say, because otherwise you'd get it too. But luckily, when I need to ring, you're asleep. And the reason I thought about that particularly, it's something I've been thinking about anyway, but because you said we need the right people with whom to explore all this stuff. And so it's not just that I've learned that the difficult emotions, and the crappy emotions, the uncomfortable emotions, the painful emotions, that I have to get to them straight away. I have to process them as I have them, but it's taking them to the right people. And I think Brené Brown says a thing about this. She says, be careful about your shame stories. You've got to take them to the right people, because otherwise you just get shamed again. If someone is in their own shame, they're not going to be able to hear yours. And that's why people write to you and say, be kind, because presumably they will have in the past taken their stories to the wrong people.
Yeah.
And so it's a little double. It's find your safe space for the processing. And I do it in all kinds of different ways. So obviously there's ringing up and shouting at Kathy. That's very good. That's pretty much my number one go-to. But then I will, if I can't get her, sometimes, she's run away to Timbuktu in desperation.
I've gone, oh God, it's Tania. No, I can't go.
Decline. I'll go to the field. And I always used to have, we've talked about this before, I used to have this big thing, don't take your emotions to the field, and it's not your horse's job to fix you. And actually, I will take my infuriated, bent out of shape, confused, baffled self, and I will stand in front of the red mare and I will say, listen, I'm really sorry, there's no Zen today. I haven't got the place of peace today.
I'm out of Zen.
I'm out of Zen. We've it's like those shelves at the beginning of the pandemic where you couldn't buy any loo paper or eggs.
We're out of the basics. We're going to have to squat in the forest, I'm afraid, today.
That's it. And
sorry.
And I'll give it to the I'll give it, actually, I'm not going to say anything about that.
Well, no, you've got to say something about that.
I was about
piqued our interest.
I was about to say I'll give it to the earth, but that's going to come out all wrong, isn't it? But yeah, so I'll give it all the metaphorical crap, not in a I need you to take this off me, I need you to resolve this. It's just I need to be congruent with you. I need to be authentic with you. And I'll do it with my posse too, my little girls. I'll say, look, I'm really sorry. I haven't been able to process my emotions today. So I'm really grumpy. And if, my voice comes out a little bit sharp or I sound a bit distracted, that's why. It's nothing to do with you. That's the thing that this pandemic has taught me, because I discovered that there were so many new emotions. It was like emotions were coming at you in an emotion storm. So if you didn't process them as they arrived, you end up being one of those crazy people who shouts at everyone on Twitter. And I decided I didn't want to be that person. So, processing and being imaginative about processing and going to the safe space and choosing the right crew and sort of checking every so often that you are offering a processing service back so that it is reciprocal. And then my second thing, and this is a super top tip that I would like to give all the listeners as a special Christmassy present.
I feel like we need music in here. Dun, dun, dun. Tania's top tip.
It really is.
Tania's top tip, yes.
It's a top tip. It's a top tip.
Dear Tania, today has been very hard. What do you recommend?
What's your top tip, Tania?
It's a little bit technical, so you're going to have to follow along. No, it's basically, if you have a difficult person in your life, as all of us do, my new thing is I pretend that person is a horse. So I would not get cross or resentful or hurt by say a unhandled pony or a pony that had been trained. Yeah, just turn them out and let them run. And then, if they need to buck and fart and just not do anything you ask them to do, that's cool, because they're just...
I love that, though. I love that. Yeah.
So the difficult people, I just think, okay, you need to have your drama and you need to have your buck and your fart and your whatever it is that you need to do, and it's nothing to do with me because you're a pony.
Yeah.
You're a pony.
Yeah.
And my God, it works. So then I just, they're just a pony. And they have no power over me whatsoever. And that, my darling, is my top tip.
Tania's top tip.
Think they're a horse or a pony.
Especially pony. Quite a fat little, not necessarily a show pony, one of those little fat ponies.
Sell well.
Sell well.
I am thinking back to your first point for Tania's first top tip of like the emotional processing and so on and so forth, and sort of show up as you are, which I'm a huge fan of. I also think, because there's been, and this is a good thing, so I'll preface it with that as well, like the realization that we have to look to ourselves first and have a degree of self-responsibility about how it is and what it is we're presenting. And that, of course, happens in layers because you can only realize what you realize. But as well, actually giving our horses, I think, more credit than perhaps we have in the past for their intelligence and also what they can hold. Because I think that the assumption that we are, we'll leave our emotions at the gate, that, we can't load anything on them. And again, I'm not meaning to sort of like stack things on them or bring your emotions in an unfair way, but I do believe they have much more capacity than we give them credit for, much more intelligence than we give them credit for. And if we really want to see it as a partnership, we have to honor that part of them and not see us as the ones always in control, or the ones like, showing up with the stuff that we have to deal with because we can't give that to them. It's like, in a good friendship, I want to hear it all. Like, it doesn't mean that you're loading me or weighing me down, but like, we have conversations about everything and we're all liberated off the back of that. And I think I see the same with my horses. It's like, I'm not coming to you because I want you to fix me.
Yeah.
But this is how I am today. And I'm not going to use that as an unfair reason to treat you badly or to lose control of the energy of what's behind that. But I will give you the credit of understanding that you can hold that space for me and we can walk together in that space and decide how it is both of us can move towards a better feeling place from that position.
I think you're talking congruence, aren't you?
Yeah. And just credit, like, it's like we have to, our horses are really intelligent. They have their own energy they bring to the party. And I think that part of our training conversation can sometimes minimize that intelligence. Like it's not an active part of the conversation. We consider how they feel and we analyze things from a behavioral perspective, but as a sentience, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it's like there's a knowing there, even if we try to pretend otherwise, so it's like if we just come in like with that reverence, I don't know, I'm sort of
but I think that's the thing, is that you are coming in that relationship with that congruence, and they're the ones that understand the congruence. They we've spoken about it before, that if you're hiding something, they can see it. So to honor them with being congruent and knowing they have the intelligence to see that in that sort of way, that just as you're saying, Tania, we've talked about this ourselves, that go to the field and say, I'm having an absolutely awful day. Here I am. I'm not going to pretend to be anything else. So
I think it's insulting to the intelligence of the horse to pretend otherwise.
No, I agree. I think it's very powerful as well.
We're saying you're such a fragile little flower that you can't deal with me being a bit jangly. I mean, what I have discovered is they don't like any form of fakery. So if I go down thinking, I've got a plaster on the Zen, when actually I want to poke people with sticks, the red mare will get twitchy, doesn't like it. But I can, if I go in and, as you say, just give my truth where I am today, she's fine. And what's interesting to me is I suddenly realized that in my book, did I say I'd written a book? In my book, I write a lot about the red man needs my best self. You know, I owe her my best self. And I think and I don't know if I explained this quite well enough, so I'll have to write another book, which is the good news. But I don't mean my best, shiniest, strongest, most able to deal with everything.
Self. Yeah.
I mean my truth, my truest self, my honest self, my, you know, we're back to what we were talking about at the beginning, that sometimes it's all a little bit crappy self. And Jane, what you touched on is so brilliant. Here's the separation, here's the line, is that you can offer them that lovely authenticity, but what you're not doing is you're not then taking out those jangly emotions on the horse. So you're not then yelling at the horse if it doesn't do what you want, or you know, I think because I was so busy dumping my emotions at the gate, I'd go down with an unresolved frustration, and then I would, and not as long ago as I'd like to say, I would say something like, "You bloody horse." I say that to my red mare, who's my heart and soul. But that was because I was trying to leave the emotion. I actually projected the emotion in a destructive way, which was by, you know, shouting unfairly and having this awful human sense of entitlement. So if you're not doing what I want you to do, then there's something wrong with you, and I'm going to call you names. Whereas if I can go and stand in front of her and say, look, I'm just feeling really rotten today, then that's out there. So then I don't have to get frustrated with her, because I've expressed the frustration, and so it's gone. That energy is out, and it can wander off around the field and do what it wants, but it doesn't twist itself into, right, we're going to get this trot if it's the last thing we do.
Yeah. So true. I find myself viscerally taken aback when I read descriptions online, especially of people describing their horses in what I would consider quite abrupt ways. And I've got a really good sense of humour. So it's not like I'm like, you know, over here, little Miss Righteous on the hill, hopefully. I certainly don't feel that, but it's like I just don't find the humour in it. And to me, it's like I see when there's a description, someone describes their horse in a less than favourable way, even if it's an as a term of endearment, quote unquote, to me, it's just so bright that the emotional stuff is with the horse, right? Is with the person, you know, like it's just so obvious. The transference is like, is so clear to me. And so I'm always really like, I even now, I guess, and like we've all had, you know, we've all come from different places. Absolutely. I'm not professing to be any sort of perfectionist, but like I do notice now, I would never think to describe my horses in a way that was less than what I considered them to be, which is, it just wouldn't, even in my dark, I just wouldn't think of them as anything less than magnificent. I can see that the shortfall lies with me, if that's the issue.
And I mean, the thing is that even with people that call their horses jerks of God knows what because they've reacted in a bad way, we all know the horse is giving them information which they are not capable, don't want to understand and look at. So it's the, you know, partly what they've got inside them, but it's also that inability to see a negative reaction by the horse as just information, that there's something going on that you as the human in the interaction should be looking at to say, okay, what's causing that? Not that you're a stupid horse, or Tanya, the moody mare, as we, you know, you love the lovely.
I'm breathing my way through that. Jane, I don't know if you have this. in New Zealand, there's actually a supplement sold by a reputable feed company called Moody Mare.
Moody Mare.
I'm getting.
I have so much to say on this. I have so much to say.
Oh my God.
A lot of it.
Have I opened the sluice gate?
A lot of it reflects back on me. But it's like I have 2 red mares.
Yeah.
And they have the biggest hearts. Like it's absolute utter bullshit. All of the stereotypes, I'll put it out there. It is like, and if it's not, then it is a self-fulfilling prophecy that is being perpetuated. And I will stake my firstborn child and my second on that. Yeah.
Bad luck for me.
There's no favoritism there. You put them both on the pile.
Like,
okay.
I just imagined the sleep that would happen off the back of that, actually. But like, no. But yeah, I have a whole lot of things to say around that. And actually, to really we've put stuff out there today, right? So I'm just going to throw it in because it's like, it's the end of 2020. If you want to keep going with me in 21, probably good to know all of the stuff about me. And that is like, it's the patriarchy. Part of it is a misogynistic patriarchal thing where it's like the moodiness of mares is attributed to this wider fabric, whether you want to buy into that or believe it or not. It's like part of the same structure. Yeah.
Put it out there, girl.
Yeah, it hits us, it's the left and the right, isn't it? First of all, you're dissing our mares, and second of all, you're dissing our femaleness. And you can just, if you want to make me moody, that's how you do it, baby.
Yeah Poke the stick and see where that leads you.
But that was the reason I called the red mare, because I wanted to start busting open the cheap stereotypes, because it's interesting, I think this is not a cultural universal, but certainly in Britain, chestnut mares are considered, that's a prejudice. There's a prejudice against chestnut mares.
I have not only chestnut mares, but chestnut mares with 4 white socks.
Socks. Oh, well, that's hopeless.
There are certain old blokes in Ireland who they wouldn't buy a horse with 4 white socks.
There are certain old blokes in Ireland I wouldn't be hanging out with.
Integrity and authenticity. There we go again.
I mean, when I say Ireland, I grew up with it. My dad grew up in Ireland, and one of the things that came out of that he brought to England with him was a lot of quite strange superstitions. And I'm not sure if it's the same now, but that was when he was growing up. So, for instance, he really freaked out if you put a hat on the bed. And there were various other ridiculousnesses. He wouldn't say, if you said bless you after he sneezed, he wouldn't say thank you. That was very bad luck, apparently. So I still to this day say very kind of you indeed. And the 4 white socks was one of the things that he saw very much in
I just want to say that there are actually a lot of Irish men I would hang out with, but just not those ones. Yeah. So it's like
just to clarify that point.
We don't want to object to gender stereotyping.
Okay, racist now, okay.
I mentioned that, and this is like, I mean, I am married, but I would marry this person. I did mention an Irish man prior to us coming on, but David White, the poet, he's looking, if you're listening, David, you can jump on my website, get in touch.
Oh, I was what you were going to say then.
God. Oh my God.
Everyone, if you haven't listened to David White or read his poetry, you need to. Oh, heaven. I just need a moment.
She's gone all unnecessary up in the top left-hand corner.
All unnecessary.
Yeah.
You're really putting it out there to finish 2020 with a bang, not a whimper.
Absolutely.
Whoa, wow.
She hopes.
I was just hoping for a poetry reading, but here we are. We're going to the next level. Oh my goodness, people are starting to know too much. I need to preserve my...
Oh dear. Okay, well, so we have... we held it together for quite a long time, and now it's all starting to
it's disintegrated.
We're getting down to base level as usual.
Well, I don't know. Like when you listen to his poetry, it's not bad. It's amazing. So I'm continuing on that thread. But back to Kathy. Enough with me. What was the question you were asking?
My question was, what have you learnt in the gnarly year that has been 2020? And so my thing was to keep as their pause and to process your emotions as soon as you have them.
I think the one thing, when you said that, and it's going to sound quite twee, I suppose, but is gratitude, even more gratitude, because every little thing is to be grateful for. When you see what's going on around you and you see what others are going through, that even though your life might be slightly more difficult than before, you've got less freedom, things you can't buy your bog roll, things like that. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And it's just to stand in the moment and be grateful. That's all there is, because I went through a time years and years ago when all the grandparents were alive, and my dad was up in intensive care. He had peritonitis and they were keeping him alive with his stomach open. My mum-in-law was literally 2 floors down, having just had a leg chopped off below the knee. My mum couldn't drive. She fell over, sprained her ankle. We had the farm, 2 small kids. And I tell you, ever since then, every day when everybody is here and alive and well, I'm grateful. It taught me the gratitude of and people are going through a lot worse than I went through then. But the one thing it taught me there was gratitude, and it's been accentuated now when you see the things that people have had to go through during this pandemic. The isolation of the old people, the fact they can't go to funerals. I mean, Tania, you experienced that, didn't you, with your stepfather, and it's just unimaginable what people have been through. So I just say thank you that I haven't had to go through it. That every day that everything is easy compared to what other people go. And it's not just a comparison. It's just I'm standing here being grateful. So I think that's the sort of, it's really brought it home to me. To be aware of how bloody lucky I am.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've just dampened the
dampened
the party.
At all. I was thinking it's hard to articulate because they're feeling states that are kind of the most standout experiences of this year. But what I've had a lot of this year, and this is not necessarily the learning part, I'll get to that secondary, but just thinking about what you're saying, Kathy, is something I found myself in the midst of what Glennon Doyle describes as the ache, which is when you're in the ache, you're kind of aware of all of the love and the joy and the abundance and the gratitude. But in your awareness of that, there is an immediate juxtaposition with the potentiality of losing it. And that is to be open-hearted in life. And I've found myself on many occasions this year where there are things which sort of force our mortality into our clear sight, where usually we can put that away or not think about it, or it's constantly being brought to our attention in different ways. And I found myself falling into the ache and feeling like I've been having almost an existential crisis, and then realizing this is part of what it means to be really alive, I guess, and part of the gift to really love something or someone or an experience, like with my children, when you feel like you want to be able to protect them from everything and you can't. And there's an ache attached to that where it's like, sometimes I wish, and it will sound ridiculous, but maybe like lots of other anyone who's loved will understand it. Sometimes I wish I hadn't had them because I can't protect them from everything I want to protect them from. And the love is so big that it feels overwhelming. And it's like, maybe this was the wrong thing to do, because now I've created this vastness of love. And how do I possibly hold that? You know, like it's like, and you sort of fall into the ache. And I think with my horses as well, that's something that many of us go through, is like, I want to preserve your spirit and your heart. And I see that so clearly. And sometimes I can't meet that in the way that I want to. And maybe my skill level doesn't navigate that in the way that I would be desirous of. And so there's a kind of like holding of that space of the magnitude of what you recognize is possible and what you want, matched with the challenges of your own humanity. You know, and you're trying to marry those two things together. And for me, the waves of that, of falling into the ache, have been very apparent this year, simply because there's been so much rawness and so much falling away of what we consider to be the stabilizing features of our life. And it's just, they never were. And so all it is a reminder of that was never certain, that was never a given, that was never solid, that was your perception. And so when you let yourself free fall, David White has this beautiful saying that I'm kind of paraphrasing, is like, and it is talking about it in relation to grief, but I think it's in relation to love and everything too. It's like, when you let yourself move into that, it's a free fall. And maybe you expect to land on the person that you love, or the person that you're grieving, or the person that you know, or your, you know, the horsing situation, whatever it is you expect to land on. And at the end of the fall, what you actually land on is yourself. And I was like, it's just so beautiful. Like, that's the return, right? That's like, we're all just in free fall. Occasionally we land on a ledge, but it's temporary, and the free fall has to happen. And that's when you're in awareness of the free fall, I guess, you have to surrender to it, but the surrender feels so uncertain and destabilizing, that it's because it's so open, it's so vast, the potentiality is so vast that we don't know how to hold it, I guess. But for me, I've had sort of more visceral experiences of the free fall, and of the cost, I guess, of the cost of loving deeply. And I think that's where the justifiable anguish or rage comes from, you know, when you think of things in a broader picture, speaking as well, like politically or environmentally, or it's like, not because we want to be angry, but because we love so deeply that we can't understand it when you don't see the love that we see, and want to protect that, I guess.
Yeah. And it's also that element of so much is out of your control.
Yeah.
That you realize your limitation so, you know, you were talking the big picture there about, say, the climate or anything like that, and that people are not responding. But there's also the sort of the more personal bit of it, is that everything, you can't dictate what's going to happen around the corner. You can't protect you could walk past the person that's got the virus, and your whole world will change. And then you start, you know, how can I take control of it? You can't. You have to let that control go, because you haven't got it. And that's the anguish, isn't it? That you love so deeply, and you're trying your very best, but at the end of the day, you can only do what you do. And you have to try and accept that. And the two words that came there when you said about surrender, I know there's sort of some stuff I've done work with, or sort of thought about, is the surrender and accept, the power of that. That when you actually surrender to the situation you're in, or what you're feeling, and then accept. And that's the sort of, for me, a bit of a power base then, because you can not control the emotion, but once you accept it and you are aware, you can then use it, move on, you have sort of yourself under more control in some respects, that the emotion isn't carrying away. You know, Tania, we speak about processing emotions, but it's the awareness, I think, is so powerful. The word, you know, when we are aware of what we're feeling and why, and the limitations of what we can do, then we might be able to move forward in a safer, that's the wrong word, a more controlled manner, a more peaceful manner, put it like that, that you haven't got that internal rage because you've accepted the situation as it is, if that makes sense.
I love that. And I was just thinking, I'm always talking about processing emotion, but I don't say what that means for me. And I imagine it means something different to everybody else. But you've hit on all the points. It's becoming aware, first of all, what is this emotion? Is it anguish? Is it rage? Is it helplessness? Is it sorrow? Then I think honouring it, because often it's, Jane, you just use the word justifiable anguish and rage. There are things, if you really love nature, we've been talking about nature, and you see people, it doesn't even have to be wrecking the whole planet. It's locally in Britain, there are lots of ancient trees being cut down for a new railway line. And each one of those, hurts my heart because I love trees. They're nowhere near me. I won't ever see the old stumps where there used to be apple trees that were seen by the Elizabethans or whatever they are. But I mean, really ancient trees, these. But that hurts. So it can be on the local level. So that's a justifiable rage. But then as you move through it, you think, is this useful? And do I want to carry this around with me for the rest of the day or the rest of the week? And if the answers to both of those are no, then I do Kathy's thing. I accept and I let go. And I was about, Kathy, you said surrender. I really hesitated to say that word because I associate that with giving in, and I hate giving in. But actually there's, as you both know, but there's actually a lovely grace to your meaning of surrender. It's not to go on fighting those useless fights. It's not to go on battling against inevitabilities. It's allowing yourself to accept and let go. To me, it's closely related to forgiveness of the self, and forgiveness of other people, something I struggle with quite a lot, but I've been working on. That's another thing I've been working on this year. Oof, that's a big one, but it's very liberating. So yes, what you've just talked about is very much a part of what I consider the way to process an emotion. And then it's not, weighing me down.
Yeah, exactly. I think of we talked about this, we had a discussion around this in Stable Hours in the Q&A in Joyride with someone asking, when is it appropriate to intervene in a situation where you can see something clearly upsetting is happening or something kind of unethical is happening that you're not connected to in any way but is in your path. And so we got into that, and then part of the discussion, which I think relates to what you're saying as well, which is how I've been dealing with, hopefully, things online to varying degrees of success, is to say, okay, so there's the energy of this experience, and then how do I alchemize that into something which is feeding what I want to see happen, rather than pouring energy on what it is I don't want to see happen. And so for me, having a tiny platform in the way that I do, I will use the feelings that I have, the emotions that I have, to pour into something that creates more of its opposite. So it's like, okay, if I'm really, really not liking how this conversation is going over here, then I will try and be way more loving over here to promote the energy of of that over here. And to me, that's a good way of like, right, I've got this this thing happening in my consciousness, there's this, so how do I, what is the opposite? What is it that I'm wanting to create out of that, not what I'm wanting to denigrate out of that? And then how do I use that energy as a propulsion or a force to feed more of the stuff I want to see more of? Yeah. And I find that sort of to be a useful way of shifting energies and redirecting my focus and not minimizing or dishonoring the power of what's present. But using that as a force field to generate energy into something that is more aligned.
I think there's something really interesting in that, and it's a more nuanced version of something I've noticed in my own online life, which is that I have unbelievably good social media experiences. I have the Special Red Mare page, and because everything I do with that horse is about optimism and hope and love and a lot of honesty, so they get all my disasters, my incredible Red Mare readers. I don't do the Instagram thing of, oh, look at my shiny life. And they love the disaster stories much more than they love the.
I was going to say, I'd be really short on posts if it was like, look at my shiny life. I'd be like, ooh, there's 2 a year. Yeah.
Oh, God.
But the only thing is, I actually forget it's a public group, because I've been doing it for 5 years, and I don't think I've had a single unkind comment in all that time. And it's quite a lot of thousands of people. I mean, this month it's tiny in online numbers, but in my numbers it's huge. It's 50,000 people have moved through that space.
Good.
And I mean, that's a lot, isn't it? Obviously, if you're those very famous people, you have millions. But for me, a non-famous, ordinary, fairly obscure, and I say that with love, middle-aged woman in Scotland with a collection of interesting hats, 50,000 people moving through your space, that's quite a lot of people. They are all charming, polite, supportive, encouraging, kind. And I think that's because I have several rules. I do emphasize the positive, I do put the love out there. I am very honest about the disaster stories, but I do always try and find a lesson in them. So there was a little crumb at the end of the disaster. And also I have absolutely there's no comparison. So I won't say, oh, that person over there is doing something terrible with their horse, or I don't like the way those people do that with their. I will only talk about the positive when it comes to. So I choose people who inspire me, and I'll talk about them. But basically, that whole page, I mean, you've seen it. It's all about the love. And so what you get in return is you get love in return. And it's extraordinary. Yeah. That's not supposed to happen on social media. That is not.
I am fortunate to say the same. My page is, if I'm talking about my own sphere, it's an amazing experience. So when I'm talking about sort of the wider online sphere, I'm talking about my, if I think about it as a little village, my shop and my department store are amazing. It's just the walk to work sometimes that gets a bit hairy. When I venture out into the streets and I'm like, whoa, I've forgotten I've been inside my own building for so long. I've forgotten about this. Yeah. So that's where I sort of have a little bit of a jolt. I was thinking though about, I don't have sort of a lesson or a learning as such that I can articulate because there's been so many. But I've been really struck by something that I think would perhaps fit the same question. You're both in the Joyride group, so you know what I'm talking about when I say this. But I had this idea at the end of last month to do a virtual advent calendar. And in the beginning, I was like, maybe I'll write something each day, and then I had sort of various ideas around that. And then I was like, actually, I would love it if people would share their own thoughts, because we're all so incredible. I want to honor the fact that everyone has a voice and something to say, and if they should choose to express that, then this could be a really nice way of creating some structure around it, so people felt like they had permission, if they need that, to kind of do to share in that way. And I've been really blown away by people's expression and articulateness, if that's a word, and strength and heart and courage. And I found it incredibly moving. And so although I've been talking a lot about, you know, the things that perhaps have irked me this year, or some of the challenges that I've gone through, what I really take away from so many experiences is strength. Like, there is incredible strength, incredible resilience, an incredible underlying pool of kindness and cooperativism that motivates us all, given the opportunity. Given the opportunity to let down our guard, given the opportunity to feel like we can actually be ourselves. When we're in that space of being ourselves, who we are is really glorious. And it's only when we feel like we need to hold up a mask, or there's a protective function that comes into play, not necessarily consciously, that perhaps we don't see that in all its shininess. But when we do, it's really breathtaking. It's really breathtaking. And I think for me, I find that really, like, it makes me take a breath. It's really...
I think what is so lovely there is you've used basically the same words to describe, you know, the people presenting their ideas and everything, the strength and the beauty of it. And it's exactly how we describe the horses. And so we've got a complete parallel there, that when we step into, you know, we feel free and safe to step into be. And again, we're going back to authenticity and integrity, aren't we? This is who I am.
And I think especially the lesson for so many of us, especially, and I will say especially women, because, you know, we all have our own stuff. And I've talked about this a lot in different podcasts, so it's not going to be a shock for anyone listening, you know, like, but as women, we have our own set of challenges and experiences to move through. And, you know, it wasn't that long ago that I know when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, and I really had to think about it, like, I'm the first person, the first female in my line ever to be having her own business, to be the breadwinner in the family, to be making the decisions. And, you know, like, that's never happened in my maternal line. So all of us are in this, like, hugely new paradigm, really, and where strength hasn't been considered a virtue of the woman's domain. And so what I'm privileged to see through all of the women that I get to work with, who are the majority women, like 99.9%, is a reconnection to their backbone, reconnection to strength, and not at the expense of heart, but together with. And it's such a beautiful thing to witness.
Talking about this, actually, I did suddenly shed a tear because you're so right. You're so right that strength was not something that you were taught or encouraged to explore as a little girl. It was a boy word. And it shows how deep the cultural conditioning goes, that you had to say you can be strong, but not at the expense of heart. There's the idea that these two are put in opposition to each other. But I think our strength comes from our hearts. You know, the bigger you can allow that heart to expand, the stronger you are. And it is the bit, Kathy made me cry when she said that's what we say about our horses. And we do. And maybe I think we women should say it about ourselves a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I think is that there's this incredible strength that comes from being together, because that female experience is so particular and it's very hard to describe to a man, really, isn't it? They often think one's exaggerating or joking or being silly, but because they haven't, and I thought it was because they didn't want to hear my lived experience. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's they genuinely can't understand it because they've never had those little everyday things, like just sometimes not being heard, not because you're stupid or annoying, but just because you're a girl, like being a red mare. And that's why we all get so cross about the moody mares, because it presses that button. It's very difficult to understand what that feels like if you've never experienced it. And so the stronger together thing is, there's just that beautiful not having to explain anything. We've all had it one way or another, to a greater or lesser degree. You know, we've all had enormous privilege, all three of us. But we all know what that feels like. We all know what it feels like to be treated like you're less than just because you have ovaries. And that's a fairly universal experience. And so then you bring your strength and you share it with the other women. And I find that incredibly moving. I love my boys. And there are so many men in the world I really admire. But it's my women who help me survive. And it's no coincidence that I have a field full of mares. That's like there's the strength in the female energy that makes me very excited. I love it.
It's I found this year confronting in that way as well. So like, while there's this sort of reconciliation and group soul that comes with the kinship of like collective experience and being in joyride, which I think is really palpably felt by a lot of people. Also with all the BLM, you know, with that's been an ongoing situation all over the world, you know, the racism and everything that kind of like popped to the surface in a different way this year. I don't want to diminish it and say that, oh, it's new, because this is so not new. Also blew the lid off my lack of knowing in lots of ways. And I would consider myself to be informed and travelled and, you know, and still not really in touch with how privileged I have been in so many ways, just as a product of being a white cisgender woman, you know. So that's been a reckoning as well, and an undoing, and you know, and I won't sort of, I find it difficult to have a conversation around, because there's so many places I can fall, you know, like saying it wrong or like, but just as a personal experience, it's like I'm really committed moving forward to understanding more about that, and to actively assisting in any dismantling that I can of anyone that would be put in a position of feeling oppressed because of a negative piece that's been created systemically or structurally. And I don't know what that looks like. And it's massively uncomfortable, you know, all of those things. But I'm willing to stare it in the eye and say, okay, if I can stop, you know, if things can stop with me in the line of how things have been perpetuated, maybe just even through my family, then I will try to do that. I will try to do that. I don't know what that looks like, as I said, but yeah, that's been a part of this year as well, kind of a broader look at that.
But isn't the heart of that, it's listening to other voices, it's listening to other experiences, it's listening to other lived realities, it's listening to other perspectives, especially the ones actually that I think do make us feel uncomfortable. So one of the things I've been trying to do is listen to people with whom I radically disagree.
Mm.
Not just stepping into the spaces where, you know, my liberal self feels at home. In that, yeah, of course, I'm interested in the experiences of people who have been marginalised. That's just the small L liberal. That's the bleeding heart. What I've been trying to do, and it's really hard, and I don't know how useful it is, but trying not to dehumanize the people who don't want to step into that space.
Mm.
And I can't do it too often because it's really upsetting. And I get very cross. It's connected with letting go is something else I'm working on. I'm trying to let go of my need to be right. That's extremely difficult, but interesting. I think that's an exploration. But to me, the point is, how many different lives can we see? Can we bear witness to? Can we listen to? No, nobody's going to be able to do that perfectly. But it's an opening rather than a closing, isn't it? It's an offering.
Totally.
And if you think of one of the things that all three of us are really committed to is listening to our horses. Now, talk about a different lived reality. I mean, they see the world on a radically different plane than we do. And yet every day we make a commitment to try and step as close to their perspective as we in our human way can get with our limited senses. We stretch our imaginations. We say to them, I see you, I hear you. And I think if one can translate that into human life, the more different human beings you can say, I hear you, I see you. That's got to be a start, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's a great.
And you know what I've learned? So, okay, so maybe this is the learning as well. Maybe this is the learning.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting to it.
Context. It's all about context. That as soon as the broader a context you can understand and learn from, the bigger your context, the greater your compassion.
Yeah.
I believe that. And that's where, on a micro level in Joyride, like the first part of it is context. This is what is happening in your body. And the context is the liberation, because it's the depersonalization of a behavior, of a response, of a reaction, which is apparently shameful, apparently weak, apparently destabilizing, to an understanding of why you might respond in this way.
Yeah.
And so when we are privileged and we think about, like, you know, on the one level, if we just to hark back to the conversation we were just having, like I fell into like a pit of shame and guilt there for a while, thinking like, oh my goodness, like this is, you know, I've benefited from it. I didn't even realize all of these things were happening. And then it's like, within the wider context, if you zoom out, the more you learn about it, the more you understand everyone is actually not the victim, but like there are compassionate understandings to everything. It doesn't absolve things. It doesn't remove you from self-responsibility. But the bigger your context of understanding, the greater your application of empathy, and also the greater, more actionable you're able to be, because it's like, I get that. I don't agree with it, but I get it. I get it. And I get where this has come from. And now if I want to create something different, then I have to say that that way of being ends with me, in my experience, in my reality, and what I offer is something different. But I think that context, like horses, you know, if you have context for why they're responding in a way that they might be, that's it's no longer a personal affront.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like there's the liberation, there's the space for something else to come in.
That what you just said there again, that's exactly what we were saying about the context of your horse's behavior. I know it's you know, you're talking a massive human thing, but it's exactly the same, that when you see the context of their behavior, you can accept and change. You know, you can present differently, you can realize that that's made them afraid, and their reaction is because of something that's been presented in such a way. And you could use those words for what you were talking about as well. You use the wrong word and somebody reacts.
Yeah,
as you said, it's the context
our
of
inflammation often comes from a lack of context. So for instance, we don't deeply read anymore. We don't read long articles. We don't read long exposés of different situations which provide context to different situations. We have sound bites. We have like a tiny bit of information, a couple of sentences, and so we're left to create the context in our own imagination. And that imagination is informed by our own perception, our own experiences,
and our own history,
and our own history. And so then we react to our own context, actually, that we've brought to it. But if we take the time to step back and really find the fuller picture, not of our own creation, but of like, this is the history, this is the reality, then I believe that is what allows us to create that space, like I said. It seems like
Tania,
a sort of a nice place to end, doesn't it? But I'm waiting for you, Tania. I feel like you're going to offer something.
I've gone into a little dreamy dream. Well, what I was thinking was, I always love to end on a good note. And there was a moment.
Do you want us to sing?
There should be singing. Why don't we do singing more? No, you said you were talking about, and I wrote it down and I can't find it now. What did she say? Strength and heart and courage. And I thought, that's our note. That's our hallelujah chorus. That's our big timpani drum. Strength and heart and courage. It's what we want in ourselves, and it's what we love in our horses. And I thought that's it. And then we went off on another tangent. And I thought,
unusual.
We've never done that before.
I don't know what happened. And I thought it was really fascinating and I think really valuable. But I thought, we're not going to get back to the timpani drum. We're not going to get back to, there's that guy, and it nearly always is a man, in the big symphony, and he literally has one job, and it's just to hit those big old drums at the end. And he stands there for the whole performance. I remember going to see this in the Albert Hall when I was a young girl. And I just thought, that man is cool, because they're all playing the violins and tooting the clarinets, and he's doing nothing. And he waits, and then just at the perfect moment. And that was, for me, that was strength and heart and courage. Are they called timpani drums? Those big brass drums. I don't know what they're called.
That's interesting. This is so random. You can add this to your book of useless knowledge.
Okay.
But so the tympanic membrane is like in the ear. It's where the sound hits the ear. And I wonder if that's where the drum has got its name from.
Its name from?
That thin skin of like resonance.
You're good.
I wondered.
That's a really good note to end on.
I haven't finished.
Oh,
so
I stand corrected. I'm sorry.
We can't get back to the drum of strength and heart and courage. And then we got to liberation and space. That to me is almost as high, if not a higher note. So we did it. We ended on a beautiful note.
We did it. We did
it, girls. You brought us all back together there, Tania, beautifully.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. But I mean, it is the end, but not the end. Because I do want to say that people are probably, definitely, most absolutely going to want to hunt you down if they aren't already stalking you online, which I know I am. And Tania, you've just written a book, which we'll just throw that in there again, has just
Have you just written a book, Tanya? Have you just written a book?
The bestseller list. Let's put this out there.
In quite a few continents, I hear.
Quite a few continents, not just with Irishmen, with everyone all over the world. And so tell us, oh glorious one, who I'm still convinced is a member of the royal family, where can we buy your book? What is it called? How should we find you? Where do we marinate in the awesomeness that is the best-selling words of Tania Kindersley? Take it away.
Absolutely. Every platform, everything you do. Out there, girl.
God, you are so lovely. Thank you. It's just go to the Red Mare page on Facebook. So that's where she gallops about. And there's lots of fun on there. It will be ruthless self-promotion for about the next week, but then we'll get back to normal servicing where you just get lots of lovely Red Mare stories and pictures of Scotland and generally cheering things. The book is called The Place of Peace. And of course, I think everybody knows what this means because I talk about it so often and they possibly don't, but it's a form of it's all the things we've been talking about. It's connection, it's awareness, it's stillness, it's anchoring yourself in nature, in your body. It's most of all, it's an offering to your horse rather than an asking of them. So I've gone very JFK down in the field. I now ask, what can I do for my horse rather than what can my horse do for me? And that's the place of peace. And the subtitle is Change Yourself, Change Your Horse. So that's my theory now is when I got into the new horsemanship, as I describe it, the Warwick Schiller School of Horsemanship, I could get a lot done. It was very exciting. Things did get better between us. We were riding out into the hills and singing the Irish songs of my childhood, which had been my dream. But I wanted to take it a step further. And I discovered that if I really wanted that relationship, that rooted place of peace, and I'm not naturally a peaceful person, in case you couldn't tell, I would have to properly change myself. And I wouldn't do that for myself, it turned out, but I would do it for a great red mare. And then, of course, the beautiful thing, I love I say, of course, but it feels inevitable to me. What happens is you then discover you get better at human life. You get better for your horse, and suddenly you can deal with the difficult people because you just pretend they're a pony. And that's what the book is about. And it's on all the Amazons. Just go to the Amazons.
All the Amazons.
Whether you're in Australia or America or France, it's on French Amazon. Wow. And type in, it's very elegant. And type in my name and type in The Place of Peace, and you can download it instantly. It's an ebook, so you can get it at the touch of a button, and you can gallop off into the place of peace and hooray, hooray.
Hooray,
hooray,
hooray.
Indeed. That's so cool. Yay. And what about you, Kathy? Kathy Prize one.
Yes, well, you can find me on Facebook under Point of Balance. So my work's it's energetic work. It's about helping people find their place of balance, which helps them heal. It's a place of health and happiness, peace and prosperity. I mean, what could be better than that? So, yeah, I've also got a website, www.kathyprice.co.uk, and I'm on the very cusp of starting to publish some really interesting stuff that's happened over the last few years with me and my horse. So people can. I'm going to what's the word? Show off. Do what it's called. I've also got a couple of offers on going on. Publicise. Thank you, darling. I totally lost the plot now. Yes, that I've got some. If you subscribe and if you wanted to buy a gift voucher for a session of Place of Peace, there's a couple of drawers going on for a free session of place of peace. I said
Yeah.
point of place. You see, I've completely lost it now. You've hypnotized me. Point of balance, yeah, a session of point of balance. There's a couple of drawers there where you can do a couple of things to be in with a chance to win a free session. So yes, just go and have a read.
Yay.
It's all good fun.
Thank you so much. I mean, everyone, I harp on about my stuff all the time on here, but you can find me at my website if you want, confidentwriter.online. I'll leave it with you and the intelligence of who you are to self-select where you would like to go next. So thank you so much, fabulous ladies. I'm convinced Santa will come to each of your houses in due course.
Thank you, darling. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I loved it. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas, everyone.
Take care.